Is New York City also similar to, say, Hubei and Italy as far as its toxicology and potential particulates in the air? Is that maybe why that was so severely affected as well?
Spot on. So New York has the highest PM 2.5 in the United States, and it's due to, of course, the high concentration of people in a very small amount of space and transportation. And even more damaging than the transportation sector is New Jersey, which sits right next to New York and pours its toxicity into New York, is the energy sector. And so there's oil refineries and all that just to the west of New York City. And that air is carried right to the city, and so you have high PM 2.5s. And of course, as soon as COVID hit, we saw lockdown happen, and our average levels of 40 to 80 PM 2.5 dropped into the 12s. And so it's very exciting to see that air clean up so quickly. And it's largely out of decreased demand for petroleum. So all the planes stopped flying in the world, and suddenly everybody had to stop enriching oil. And at the same time, we happen to have price war in the Middle East over oil that preceded or coincided with the pandemic. And so, oil prices, collapsed across the world. So everybody stopped refining it and all of that. And so with that, there was a cleanup of the air, and we should have seen, a really short, syndrome. It kept going on and on because the patients in New York were being told that you're going to die of a virus and you better hurry up and get to a hospital. And so through fear, we were driving people into a hospital system with the belief that we needed to put those people on a ventilator, when in fact there is no amount of oxygen you can pump into somebody with histotoxic hypoxia to make them better. Their red blood cell cannot carry the oxygen. You can give them 100% oxygen, and they're not going to improve their hypoxic state because you have failed to fix the red blood cell. It turns out that cyanide poisoning can be reversed with a $10 package of syringes. For $10, you give 3 injections, starts with sodium nitrate and 2 other injections. It's benign. It's a quick, self-administered kit that we give, people in the chemical industry who have to work around cyanide all the time. We give them a kit to carry, and they're supposed to self-administer if they get exposed to a cyanide poisoning event. And so it's easy to administer. Any nurse, any individual could do it. And it would reverse that hypoxic injury in minutes. Literally, in minutes, you would take that person out of that hypoxic injury. And so if we had done that, if we had taken the approach of we need to change the shape of the red blood cell, we would have radically reduced mortality. Instead, we whipped all those people on a ventilator, and we reached 88% mortality rates in New York City hospitals, the worst mortality rate of any virus I think ever seen, not because the virus was causing the problem, but because our management of this terrifying virus syndrome was so mistaken. It was so misled. So how do physicians make that big of a mistake? Like, how did we not see that they were not showing up with fever and infection? And the answer is fear. We cannot see when we are in damage control and the ER is filling up with people and they're hypoxic and nothing we're doing is working. We go into a complete fight or flight state. And interestingly, the human brain, when it goes into a fight or flight state, specifically shuts down the area of your brain that does creative thought. And so we could not think creatively about this problem because the neurobiology prohibited our capacity to think creatively because we were in a fight or flight state, because we allowed the fear paradigm to demand it. And I think that if there were crimes against humanity that happened in the last few months, it was in our medical management of these patients that died isolated. We wouldn't let their families in to see these dying people. For the first time that I've ever heard, we force people to die alone. And we don't do that in medicine. We don't do that in the Marines. We don't do that in the military. If somebody's dying on the field, you run through the gunfire, you run through the rocket fire to retrieve that Marine. We have that same attitude in medicine, and I guarantee you every physician and nurse who had to take care of this pandemic has that ethos. They will be by their patient's side. They are so courageous. And so I'm so heartbroken, and it really tears me up as a human, let alone a physician, to know that my colleagues were put into such a massive fear state that they had to break their deepest ethical commitments to their patients. They had to break those out of a belief that they were going to protect other people by not touching this patient. And now we know that there was essentially 0 hospital-acquired COVID cases in the world over these last few months. And so we were not at risk of, getting some massive viral thing because these patients weren't dying of the virus. They were dying of downstream pneumonia, bacterial infections, and and histotoxic injury to their organ systems and multi-organ failures, they weren't even infected. They weren't producing COVID out there. They weren't even the natives. By the time they're ventilated in the ICU, it's not, the virus is gone. The virus is only present for 3 to 5 days before it stops producing itself. And so, but they couldn't think that clearly because they thought this is like, something like Ebola or whatever. Ebola only has a mortality of 30%, 88% mortality, and a rupture of ethical behavior that just, I know, is tearing up physicians and nurses right now and listening to this maybe, but I know you were experiencing it even at that time. There was cognitive dissonance happening where you knew you were doing the wrong thing, but you couldn't figure out what the right thing was. And so my heart goes out to all of you, and my love goes out to all of you to say, I love you, and I love you for your care of those patients, and you tried everything you could in a desperate situation to make sense of all of it and care for your patients to the best of your ability under mandates that ruptured your ethical intuition at a deep, deep level. And I want us as a scientific community, as physicians and nurses, I hope that we create some online forums, some town halls to come together to start to heal each other. Because if we hit the next pandemic without healing, we're going to make more desperate mistakes again. And it could get much, much more grim as to our behavior. And I think we will start, zipping people into body bags before they're even dead if we let this mortality kind of concept keeps creeping into our mindset. And when you break your ethical code and you break your ethical intuition and don't heal it, you become capable of horrific things. And so as a medical community, I hope that we have a real deep sense of our need to heal, our need to stop the chaos and stop the erosion of sovereignty of health, the sovereignty of patient rights, the sovereignty of human biology in its connection to Mother Nature ultimately. And if we start to heal that, we will make more rational and measured responses to the next tragedy that we face.